Hi and welcome to the short overview of the homing missile turret system. Yeah, let's check in. First of all, here we got our demo scene set up. As you can see, there's prefab for the missile turret as well as 3 targets. If I zoom out, you can see them here. They're just boxes. Each of the box has a damage behavior script, that's for the enemy targets, rigid body that's needed, and a box collider that's needed as well. Let's start this so you can see what's going on. Alright, we're now running, and I grab my first enemy target and drag it towards the missile turret. And as soon as I enter its radius, the turret starts firing, it fires a missile, and the target gets destroyed. The second missile got fired before the target was destroyed, so it flies out until it self-destructs after a time. I now can take the second target, pull it in, see that the missile still follows, but the target has stopped firing because I'm not any longer in its valid radius. I can grab this third target here and pull it right next to the turret and nothing happens. That's because the missile turret has a targeting system that can include tags of objects that should get targeted and that should be shot at, and this object has no tag that is valid for this operation. As you can see as well is I've already shot 3 missiles out of my cartridge with 12. So real geometry gets removed and launches one after another from the missile turret. Okay, let me stop this and go over the settings for the missile turret itself. First of all, we've got a sphere collider that is used to gather the targets in the valid range of the missile turret. So if you change the radius, you increase or decrease the size where the missile turret picks up targets. So if I created a radius in this size, you can see all my targets are outside, but if I create a greater one, now all targets are inside, and the turret should target these 2 because they are in the list of tags to attack. If I start this now, we can see it. And now you have seen the first target gets attacked, and after it's destroyed, the missile that was already in flight changes its direction to the new target. Okay, let's look at the tags to attack list around here. We've got an array. You can control the size of the array. Currently I've got 2 elements, 2 tags that are included, and we can look if it works. And if I pick this target here and set the tag from untagged to enemy 2 and reset the radius to 25 and start that again. If I now move this target into the radius, you can see the turret aims and fires at my target. Alright. Next option is the fire rate. That is the speed with the turret fires its missiles. If you put in 1, it takes 1 second for each missile to be launched. If you get higher, it's that same amount in seconds between each missile launch. You can set a maximum missile ammunition. If you set it to 12, like in this case, my missile turret has a cartridge which contains 12 missiles at max. Currently you can fill this cartridge, and if all 12 missiles have been fired, the cartridge is depleted and no longer works. If you go below that, let's say 6, I've got 6 missiles now loaded, and so on. If I set it to 0, the ammunition is unlimited. So the cartridge depletes, but after it has been depleted, it will reload, and now that's the next option in here. That's reload time with 3 seconds currently. So if it's empty, it will take 3 seconds to reload the missile turret cartridge again. If you set it to 0, it will reload instantly. So on the next one, we put in our missile prefab. You can use mine, or you can use your own, since this is a script that can be applied to any turret that is built like mine. So here we've got a missile prefab, and we could just pull it right in here. It should be a game object, and please refer to the documentation how the missile should be set up. Next one is a fire effect. Yeah, that's optional, but if you look at the turret, if it picks up a target and fires, you can see smoke coming out of the place where the missile was fired. So that's just nice eye candy to have. Next one are the missile spawn points. So these are necessary. You give this array a size between 1 and unlimited, more or less, how many spawn points you have. In my case I have 12, because I have 12 holes in the cartridge for missiles, and these are just empty game objects that are placed where I want my missile to be spawned. So if we look at this in wireframe mode, you can see it sits right here, and if I get to the next and next. So yeah, that's just about it with this piece of code. The missile turret fires from top to bottom, so if you put this one in here, this is the first missile that gets fired, and then this and this and this, and so on. Okay, now to the next step. I called it the turret turntable holder. With that I mean the upper group of the missile turret, this one here that spins in the Y direction. You put in here your game object that contains this, and also all objects that should be rotated as well, like the cartridge in my case. So reset this back to 0. Just pull it in, and the next one is the cartridge holder. This is what rotates in the X direction, so this whole compartment, just to allow aiming at the target. And the last two options, or three options, is the missile cartridge rotation boundaries. You can clamp the values in which the cartridge rotates. In my case I decided for this turret it's dumb to fire down, because it could hit the bottom, it could hit itself, and it looks dumb. And I've clamped the value at 75 degrees, so this is nearly vertical up. That should be enough for a missile turret like this. It can be used for anti-air and anti-ground purposes, and you can adjust this to your liking. Next one is the aim rotation speed. It's currently set at 1. That's just the speed at which the two parts, the turntable and the cartridge, rotate towards the target if it picks one up. It's flexible. You could make it faster, you could make it slower. And last is a missile aim fire threshold. So the missile target could fire as soon as it picks up a target, but that's not very good. The target could be behind the turret, so the rocket would launch and have to travel all around. So you've got a threshold value set here, and it prevents the missile from being fired if the angle difference between the target and the cartridge is above the entered value. In my case it's 5 degrees. If you set it higher, it should fire faster, but it's not totally centered on the object. You can see movement hasn't finished at all, but it still fires. Now can fire again. Okay, it can't because my target is destroyed. Now it fires, and it fires before it reaches its direct direction. Okay, that's it for the turret. Let's take a quick look at the missile and how it should be set up. The missile should have its forward direction in Z. The missile should have a rigid body, a capsule collider. In my case, you could use any collider. And it has the missile behavior script. And let's look at this for a second. We have the missile travel speed, so you set the speed with which the missile travels forward in units per second. You set the turn speed. A lower turn speed makes the missile turn slower, and if you've got a fast moving target, you could lose, or the missile could lose track of the object and might not hit it. Next one is accuracy deviation. You can set an accuracy level with what an accuracy the object gets targeted. So if you have you don't want to always hit the bullseye, but have some randomization, you can set a value above 0 here, and the higher the value, the less the likelihood of hitting the target shrinks. We've got a smoke spawn. This is just an empty game object inside here for the place where the smoke trail of the missile, the effect, should spawn from. It's not mandatory, but it helps. You could just put in your missile object itself. We've got the smoke trail effect. That's just a game object with a particle effect I provided under particles. And we've got the explosion effect, which is also a particle effect which gets launched when the missile explodes. Now we've got text to explode on a collision. So we could include game objects with the tag which trigger the explosion of the missile. We have also the option to ignore objects on collision, and this is necessary if you don't want the missile to explode when it leaves the boundary of the missile turret collider, which is used for the targeting range. Set in here the turret, but you could set in more. Lifetime is for the auto-destruct function of the missile. If you launch 100 missiles and just one or two hit, you have 98 missiles still alive, and that could clutter your scene. So you can set a lifetime for the missile that it destroys itself after a specific time. Next is time till armed. You can set a time that it takes until the missile can explode on collision. That is, it can be helpful if you have another or have a different shape for your turret. So if you launch it and it collides with some other geometry, it doesn't get destroyed at this moment. Next we have maximum explosion damage. So if the missile has a direct hit on your target, this is the amount of damage that gets applied to the hit target. And we got an explosion radius, so you can use splash damage with the missile. Say it explodes and you have two more enemies next to it, it will apply a percentage of the full damage to these other targets based on their distance to the explosion source. And lastly, that's not mandatory as well, is an audio source with the sound effect for the missile flight. And lastly, let's take a quick look at the damage behavior script of the enemy, of the target. It's a totally simple one, just has a maximum health and has a field for a particle effect for the explosion when it gets destroyed as well. Okay, I hope this was informative, and if you have any questions, just drop me an email and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks.